Herb. Herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Herb.
Welcome to Eugene Cannabis TV. You made the trip, the episode 631, and it's the last show of 2016 for the Emerald Empire, for the Eugene Cannabis TV show. And so I'm glad you've joined us, and we got some news stories, both good and bad. Got some announcements real quick. I've got LV's, still have LV's tin that she gets her medical marijuana in from the federal government. She gets 300 cigarettes that are all rolled and packed into a tin like this. And it says right on it, all kinds of stickers, marijuana cigarettes, high potency, discard after February 24th, 2017. So anyway, so these are quite collector's items. She's gotten as much as $3,000 for an empty tin. And but I do have a hold of this one, and she's wanting to get rid of it. I say get rid of it. She'd like to get a donation for it, and she's asking for $1,000 because she went to Colombia, her birth country, and with Paul Stanford and a whole bunch of people, and she stayed down there, so she's still there actually, and so she's having a great trip, but she's going to need some cash to operate on, So anyway, if you know anybody that could kind of spend that kind of money to get a very unique item, cannabis history, anyways, it's there. So you get a hold of me at DanK bagman@hotmail.com. And I want to tell you about a couple things coming up. Now, first of all, this is the 12th as we film this. So this will just barely, show will be out, and then this is going to happen, but I still wanted to bring it up. I didn't have the information last week. Joint Interim Committee on Marijuana Legalization is having a meeting up in Salem. It's going to be on Wednesday, December 14th. Starts at noon, at high noon. So I wish I had known about that ahead of time. I could have made arrangements to try to be there too, because this is a very important meeting. It's going to be interesting what happens this year with marijuana legal, with the marijuana issue in Oregon in general. A lot of problems. In fact, we're going to do a story about growers in a minute. But anyway, so that's going on the Wednesday the 14th. Also, if you're into the cannabis industry, the Oregon Cannabis Association, it's the only statewide organization devoted to protecting and promoting the interests of Oregon's cannabis business community at the local, state, and federal level. So join us today and become a professional voice in our community. Well, on Wednesday, December 28th, from 5:30 to 7:30, that's at Lola's Room in Portland, they're going to have a happy hour and legislative preview. And that'd be a great way to network with people. And it says, please join the OCA for our 2016 holiday happy hour and legislative preview, hosted at Lona's Room. This is a chance to hear about our legislative priorities, expected legislative issues, and what 2017 has in store for cannabis all around, featuring special guests. If you are a member, there's a chance to share what you hope we can accomplish during the next session. Join us for drinks, food, and updates as we move to the next year. Tickets are only $15 for non-members. So that isn't too bad a deal. So anyway, if you can get to that, that's a good one. December 28th. And again, that is the Oregon Cannabis Association. So anyway, I want to talk about our growers. Because of the changes, because of the fees that the state is imposing on the medical marijuana program participants, it continues to shrink. Now growers are not renewing grows for patients because of the $250 growers fee, and they just can't afford it. And according to this chart, January 2015, It was 8,461 in October 2016. This is Oregon patients without growers. October 2016, 16,322. So it just almost doubled in 8 months. To give you an example of how bad it is. And I've got a story about that right here, rather an op-ed. This is by Anthony Taylor, who is one of the founders of Cannabis Oregon, or Compassionate Oregon. And it's in the OCCnewspaper.com, dated the 9th of December. He said, I received a phone call from a staffer in Salem the other day. A staffer is someone who works in the office of an elected official, agency, or department. The caller expressed to me a desire to connect a friend who is a medical marijuana patient with a grower. Why, I was asked, is it so hard for patients to find growers? The new plant limits and reporting system for OHA growers, I replied, have driven growers underground, so to speak. How's that, was the response. Here's what I told the caller. Today, nearly 17,000 Oregon medical marijuana patients list no grower, and the person's friends is about to become part of that group. The plant limits authorized by the legislature reduced the number of large gardens that were using patients to increase the amount of marijuana they could put into the market. Whether regulated or unregulated, the limited gardens to 48 plants in rural areas and 12 plants in residential zones in cities. While state law allows OHA growers to grow for as many patients as they think they can support, the number of plants they may grow is limited. So the more patients a grower takes on, the less excess that grower will have available for the market, and the less money that the grower will make. In addition, an OHA grower growing for other patients, growing for themselves and planning to sell product to a dispensary, or growing for themselves and address other than where they live, must report to AOHA all cultivation, processing, distribution of products from the grow site every month. Finally, if you and your spouse are growing for yourself at your primary residence, you are not selling to a dispensary, and you have no more than 12 plants, you do not have to report. What this means for patients is that the grower pool has shrunk dramatically and continues to do so. Gone are the days of growers providing the 60, 70, 80, or even 100 patients. Most of the large-scale growers have moved over to OLCC and have not been able as yet to bring their patients with them. The growers who did not want to report reduced their grow sites to 12 plants and told patients they were growing for what they would have to find a new grower. Most had not been able to. In January 2015, Oregon Medical Marijuana Program statistics showed 8,461 patients who did not list a grower. By October 2016, less than 2 years later, the number is nearly doubled. Well, according to our chart here, it's it's 1 year and 8 months. Okay, so that wasn't just 8 months as I mentioned earlier. Anyway, it says, so to the staff who called, this is why patients looking for a grower to provide them with much needed and in some cases life-saving medicines cannot find one. That is why your friend will have a tough time finding a grower as well. And then John Sajo, which is one of our activist friends and very, very sharp, he wrote in a comment, many legislatures still fail to grasp that lots of patients can't just go to dispensaries when they lose their grower because they can't afford to. It shouldn't be surprising that chronically ill patients who can't work often have little or no money. What is surprising is that Oregon's Democratic legislatures are willing to throw these patients under the bus in their single-minded pursuit of marijuana revenue from taxes. OMMP growers providing free cannabis to tens of thousands of needy patients has been a surprisingly successful welfare program that costs taxpayers nothing. The sad thing is that the patients losing growers are the sickest, poorest, and most helpless. So I appreciate it, John Sajo. John always, when he speaks, it's right on. When he speaks, I always like to say, yeah, what he said. So anyway, that's the situation, and that's some of the things that they'll be working on in the legislature. Well, at least I hope, but I think it's going to be more like the legislature is going to be trying to figure out how they can get more money out of the program, because that's been their main, seems to be their main goal. And also, and this is really on a happy note, this is our friend Eddy Lepp. He's gotten out of federal prison. Eddy Lepp, Charles Edward Lepp is a Vietnam War veteran, currently serving a 10-year sentence for the crime, or was, serving a crime of conspiracy and cultivation with the intent to distribute marijuana. According to Wikipedia, Lepp became the first person arrested, tried, and acquitted under California's medical marijuana law. A subsequent raid on his house in 2002 resulted in confiscation but not prosecution. After this, the gardens really took off, and Lepp devotedly explored the intersections between religious and medical uses of marijuana. Their property became known as Eddy's Medicinal Gardens and multi-denominational Chapel of Cannabis and Rastafari, where he grew more than 20,000 pot plants in plain view of a state highway in northern California's Lake County. This large grow, even though compliant with the California law, did not sit well with federal officials who arrested him again and barred him from using medical marijuana or religious offenses. He was convicted in September 2008. Visits are a wonderful thing. A quote from Eddy Lepp. Visits are wonderful things. Sadly, for most of us, they happen way too seldom. A friend of mine has been in for 14 years with 6 left to go and has had 3 visits total. For a country that encourages family values, we do little to encourage they do little to encourage when they last with outrageous sentences from the start. So anyway, and then according to tuckothetown.com, William Breeze wrote 10 years prison upheld in the county in Eddy Lepp marijuana case, and this was dated in July 2011. The federal appeals court on Wednesday upheld the conviction of the 10-year prison sentence of Charles Eddy Lepp, who grew 32,000 plants. The federal judge who sent Lepp to prison, this is it. The federal judge who sent Lepp to prison in 2009 criticized a federal law which required a 10-year prison sentence for growing more than 1,000 cannabis plants, reports Bob Glico of the San Francisco Chronicle. But U.S. District Judge Marilyn Hall Patel of San Francisco said she had no choice under the law, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed. The statutory minimum sentence is not cruel and unusual punishment, the three-judge panel had ruled. Federal agents arrested Reverend Lepp in 2004 after finding the marijuana plant in his home in Upper Lake. Most of them in Clearview. We went through that before. So anyway, Eddy Lepp is out, and that is really good news. Glad to hear it. Eddy Lepp actually opened our HempFest for us in 2007 or 8. I can't remember exactly. He brought Jack Herrera, and Jack Herrera would not have come if Eddy Lepp hadn't brought him, I guarantee you. Jack Herrera did not like me. I called him on his stuff too often, and he told his stepson, or his godson, when my name came up, he says, "I don't like that guy. He makes me mad." But hey, I just called him on his stuff, you know. But anyway, that's another story. So Eddy Lepp, he's out and free, and boy, am I glad to hear that, and I'm sure looking forward to seeing Eddy again. Good guy, and one of our heroes for the cannabis movement. So come on back for second part. I'll be.
If you're an adult who enjoys a good beer, there's a similar product you might want to know about. One without all the calories and serious health problems. Less toxic so it doesn't cause hangovers or overdose deaths, and it's not linked to violence or reckless behavior. Marijuana, less harmful than alcohol, and time to treat it that way. For more information, visit marijuanaissafer.org.
Welcome back to the second half of episode 631, the last show of 2016, and sure glad you're here with us. Give us a shout in the comment section on YouTube, and or send us an email, better yet. Don't hear from enough people, especially through the email. And I did want to dress up tonight, being the last show of 2016, so I, of course, wore my tuxedo. And I wanted to do a story, and this was, I thought was kind of interesting, because I know there's a lot of questions since the election that we've been wondering about. This was actually at the website time.com, Time Magazine, written by Katie Steinmetz, dated December 8th this year. 7 reasons President Trump is unlikely to fight legal marijuana. Subtitle is a look at why it would be hard to stop what the states have started. With Donald Trump nominating cabinet members who have spoken out against legal marijuana, some are arguing that the war on drugs, they may take a comeback. But while there's a reason for anxiety among those selling recreational marijuana legally in states like Colorado and Washington, an all-out war remains unlikely. Experts say that trying to undo legalization at this point would come with serious economic and political hurdles. It's certainly come so far, says Sam Kimmin, a marijuana law expert at the University of Denver, that it can't be undone without a heavy cost. Others, even more skeptical, says Mike Vitello, a marijuana law expert at the University of the Pacific. It's kind of like illegal immigration. You can't build a wall high enough. Here are 7 reasons that it would be hard to stop what the states have started. Raging a war on pot would go against the will of many voters. It would be a very blatant finger to the voters, said the Drug Policy Alliance's Amanda Ryman. In November, voters in 8 states cast their ballots in some form of marijuana legalization. That means that medical marijuana is now legal in 28 states, and recreational marijuana is legal in 8, including the nation's most populous, California. With that powerhouse on board, a total of about 1/4 of the population lives in a place where voters have decided adults should be able to consume cannabis, much the same as they consume alcohol. And all but 6 other states have legalized a non-psychoactive form of cannabis known as CBD, which people use to treat conditions like juvenile epilepsy. Another reason is public opinion on marijuana is going in the opposite direction. While the Democrats are generally more supportive of legalizing marijuana than Republicans, states of all shades, blue, purple, and red, have embraced legal marijuana in some form, despite the fact that the federal government puts marijuana in the same class as heroin. Support for fully legalizing marijuana hit an all-time high of 60% in October, according to Gallup, and polls have found public support for medical marijuana to be nearly 90%. Trump himself has said he supports medical marijuana and that states should handle the question of whether to legalize. Both Alabama Jeff Sessions, Trump's pick for Attorney General, and retired John Kelly, Trump's selection to head the Department of Homeland Security, have criticized legalization. Sessions, who would be the nation's top law enforcement official if confirmed, has called reform a, quote, tragic mistake, and said pot is, quote, not the kind of thing that ought to be legalized, unquote. Kelly has said legalization sends confusing signals to other countries, that legalization makes it appear that, quote, we seemingly are not caring about drugs anymore, unquote. Trump sings another tune. Decades ago, he said that all drugs should be legalized, and in order to take profits away from the black market players and produce tax dollars that could be spent on educating people about the dangers of drugs. In a 2016 appearance on Fox News, he said of medical marijuana, I'm in favor of it 100%. And while he has said he opposes legalizing marijuana for adult use, after a primary debate in Colorado in 2015, Trump also said, I think that should be a state issue, state by state. It does not seem high on his list of priorities. While Trump's comments on marijuana may not rise to the level of a campaign promise, and while he's proven flexible on his own prior stances on issues, reform advocates point out an indisputable fact. The president-elect almost never talks about pot. In fact, a search of Trump's very active Twitter feeds produces 0 mentions of the word marijuana compared to more than 100 mentions of the word immigration. And with limited resources, a president and his cabinet can only fight so many battles. he talked about changing federal policies at almost every possible level, says Mason Trevert of the marijuana policy project, but he never said he's itching to change the way the government is handling state marijuana laws. Plus, Trevett adds, in his administration, if his administration tried to dismantle markets that so many states have decided to build, he'd be inviting new opposition, not only from pro-marijuana voters, but hardcore libertarians and others who believe strongly in states' rights. Waging a war costs money. There are some dismantling tactics that the federal government could use that are relatively resource-light. The government could send threatening letters to landlords who rent space to dispensaries, for instance, telling them to evict their tenants or have their assets seized because their businesses are in violation of the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Or the government could send those letters to state regulators, telling them to revoke all the licenses they've issued to growers, processors, and retailers. And if those states didn't comply, the government could file a lawsuit claiming that federal law preempts state regimes. Yet many of the best warren strategies of the war on drugs, like raids, require funding, and Congress holds the purse strings. Pro-marijuana advocates hope the powerful congressional delegations from places like California will abide by the will of their voters and stymie any efforts to fund the fight. And they have reason to be optimistic. Even after the 2016 election, members of Congress proved willing to use money as a tool to actually protect legal marijuana, passing an amendment to the budget that prevented the government from spending money to prosecute medical marijuana patients or distributors who are abiding by state laws. All the states that have legalized it, says the University of Pacific's Vitello, are going to bring a lot of pressure to bear not to disrupt it. There's a lot of money in marijuana these days and the prospect of much more in the future. If legal marijuana markets didn't exist tomorrow, that would mean the shuttering of hundreds of small businesses and the loss of thousands of jobs. It would buoy the black market, and it would also make for a lot of unhappy investors. The market for legal marijuana in America is already worth an estimated $7 billion, and according to market research from ArcView, it will be worth more than $20 billion by 2020. While many bigwig venture capitalists and corporations are still wary of writing checks because of prohibition, others are proving eager to cash in on the green rush. Billionaire Peter Thiel says there's a huge amount of capital formation. There are literally billions of dollars of investments in these gray market establishments. The extent of federal government's authority over these matters is unclear. The Obama administration issued several memos that essentially gave states that had legalized marijuana a yellow light, says the Drug Policy Alliance's Ryman. It states vigorously upheld, quote, an appropriately strict regulatory system, unquote, and protected federal interests like keeping pot out of the hands of minors. The memo suggested that the federal government would not interfere. They never made marijuana anything other than illegal in the federal government's eyes, and everyone operating a marijuana shop is currently in violation of federal law. But it's an open question as to how much power the feds have to shut state markets down. The gray area would likely have to be made clear in court, legal experts say, and the Supreme Court refused earlier this year to hear a case that would have yielded an opinion on this matter. Should the Trump administration decide that it wants to interfere, there are clear limitations, say University of Denver's Kamen. The federal government cannot require states to prohibit marijuana, nor can it force states to enforce federal law. While the Drug Enforcement Administration could go into any state and arrest every single dispensary owner, at least in theory, the state and local police would be under no clear legal obligation to help. In the past, the feds have focused more on big fish. Historically, Kamen says, the federal government is not the primary enforcer of drug laws in this country. The states are. Trump has upended precedent in many ways, of course, and this could end up being one more example. The question, Kamen says, is how much pain and suffering is the federal government willing to induce to do it? So it still remains, I guess, an open question, and time will tell. The way President-elect Trump flip-flops, it's hard to say. I would hate to do any kind of a wager on how that's going to turn out. So I don't know. This is interesting. Kind of got my dander up a little bit. This was at the abc15.com website, written by Melissa Blasius, dated December 6th, with the title, "No Charges Filed Against Phoenix Police Officers Who Forced Man to Eat Marijuana." So in Phoenix, nearly 3 months after allegedly forcing a man to eat marijuana at a traffic stop, 2 Phoenix police officers have not been charged with any crimes. AMC 15 interviewed the victim, Edgar Castro, in September, and he said the officer told him that they would take him to jail if he didn't eat the pot found in his car. The police report released today recommended misdemeanor charges for Joseph McFadden and Richard Pina. Both are probationary officers. The report says the pair refused to answer questions about the incident. Another officer at the traffic stop corroborated the victim's story about the marijuana. ABC 16 checked Phoenix Municipal Court and Maricopa County Superior Court Tuesday and learned no charges were ever filed. Phoenix police officials explained that the September case is still being investigated internally, and they may submit the case to a prosecutor to review later this month. McFadden, Pina, and another officer lost their jobs after the marijuana fiasco. So, well, at least they lost their jobs. I guess that's some consolation, but they'll probably get another job somewhere else. So that's how they do things, you know. We ended up some California officers here on our local police force a while back. I remember it was not good news. So anyway, so happy, hope 2016 was good for everyone. And we'll be back, and we'll be doing a show on January 2nd. So 7:30 at Monday night behind the Sheldon High School Community TV Studios. Love to have you come by and come by and say hi. We need and oh, by the way, and we need, as I said before, a desktop hard drive, like a 2 terabyte, 3 terabyte. We could really use some storage. And a plastic cutter help. Anybody has a plastic cutter, know how to run one, have the software, get a hold of me. Thank you. See ya.